Last spring, I made a mistake that nearly killed every tomato plant in my raised bed. I brought home 2 big bags of fresh sawdust from a woodworking shop down the road, spread it right around the base of my plants, nice and thick, thinking I was giving them the best mulch money can't buy. 3 weeks later, every single leaf had turned yellow. The stems went limp. My beautiful Cherokee purples looked like they were dying of thirst in the middle of a well-watered garden. I was heartbroken. And if you have ever done the same thing, if you have ever watched your plants wilt after adding sawdust, I want you to know it was not your fault. Nobody warned us. But today I'm going to explain exactly what went wrong and, more importantly, I'm going to show you how to turn that exact same sawdust into the richest, darkest, most powerful fertilizer you have ever touched, completely free and backed by real soil science. Welcome back to Rooted in Grace, my dear friends. I'm so glad you are here. Now, here's the claim I'm going to back up in this video. Properly composted sawdust can outperform standard garden compost by 400%. Not because of magic, because of what happens at the microscopic level when you get the process right. By the end of today's video, you will understand exactly why that number is real, and you will have every step you need to do it yourself in your own backyard. And stay with me until section 6, because that is where I'm going to share a free pH secret that most commercial nurseries know, but almost never talk about. It is the difference between soil that feeds your plants and soil that locks every nutrient away where your roots can never reach it. So, pour yourself a cup of tea, settle into your chair, and let's get into it.
Section 1. The hidden danger. The wood you must never use. Before we build anything beautiful, we need to talk about the one mistake that could ruin everything. And this is serious, friends, so please listen carefully. Not all sawdust is safe for your garden. There is a world of difference between sawdust that comes from a freshly milled natural log and sawdust that comes from treated, manufactured wood. Here is the rule, and it is absolute. Never use sawdust from plywood, MDF, particle board, or any wood that has been painted, stained, varnished, or pressure treated. That kind of wood is loaded with chemical preservatives. We are talking about formaldehyde-based glues, industrial solvents, and in some cases, heavy metals like copper and arsenic. These chemicals were designed to stop fungi and insects from eating the wood. But if you put that sawdust in your garden, those same chemicals will leach into your soil and get absorbed by the roots of your vegetables, the very food you are growing for your family. So how do you tell the difference? Treated wood often has a greenish or olive tint. It may smell chemical or plasticky instead of smelling like fresh timber. Sometimes you will see rows of tiny, uniform incisions across the surface where the preservative was injected. Good, safe sawdust looks uniformly light beige and smells like a freshly cut tree. That sweet, woody scent you remember from your grandfather's workshop. If you are not 100% certain where the sawdust came from, leave it alone. No bag of free sawdust is worth risking your family's health. The simplest approach? Go to a local sawmill, a woodworking shop, or a tree trimming service and ask directly, is this untreated natural wood? Most of them will be happy to let you haul it away for free because to them, it is just waste taking up space.
Section 2. The Great Nitrogen Robbery. Why raw sawdust kills plants. All right, now that we know which sawdust is safe, let us solve the real mystery. Why did my tomato plants turn yellow? Why does raw sawdust seem to poison everything it touches? The answer is one of the most fascinating things in all of soil science. And once you understand it, you will never look at a pile of wood shavings the same way again. Sawdust is almost pure carbon. Scientists measure organic matter using something called the carbon-to-nitrogen ratio, or C/N ratio. Healthy, finished compost has a ratio of about 10 to 20 parts carbon for every 1 part nitrogen. Nice and balanced. But fresh sawdust, it is wildly unbalanced. We are talking 500, sometimes even 600 parts carbon to just 1 tiny part of nitrogen. Now, here is what happens when you mix that raw, carbon-heavy sawdust straight into your garden soil. The bacteria and fungi that live in the earth suddenly have an enormous feast of carbon to eat. They wake up, they multiply like crazy, and they start devouring those wood fibers. But to digest all that carbon, they need fuel, and their fuel is nitrogen. The problem? The sawdust itself has almost no nitrogen. So the microbes do the only thing they can. They steal it. They pull every molecule of available nitrogen out of the surrounding soil. And they are so efficient at this, your plant roots do not stand a chance. The microbes win every time. This is called nitrogen drawdown, or nitrogen immobilization. And it is the #1 reason gardeners accidentally kill their plants with sawdust. Without nitrogen, your plants cannot build chlorophyll. Their older leaves turn pale yellow from the bottom up. Growth stops completely. They look sick. They look starved. Because they are starved. Imagine setting a beautiful dinner table for your family, but a swarm of uninvited guests rushes in and eats every bite before anyone can sit down. That is exactly what is happening in your soil. The good news? Once you understand this, you hold the key to turning that problem into your greatest advantage. Because if we simply give those hungry microbes their own nitrogen supply, they will leave your plants alone and do something extraordinary with that sawdust instead. Section 3. The Golden Elixir. Feeding the microbes so they stop robbing your plants. Here is where everything changes. This is the turning point. We know the microbes need nitrogen to break down the carbon in sawdust. So the solution is simple. We give them their own nitrogen source, right from the start, before the sawdust ever touches our garden beds. We are going to actively compost this sawdust with what soil scientists call high nitrogen activators. Now, I'm going to share something that might surprise you. One of the most scientifically effective nitrogen activators available is something you produce every single day for free: human urine. I know. It is not a polished topic for polite conversation, but the science is absolutely clear. Fresh urine is primarily composed of urea, and it is remarkably rich in nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, the 3 nutrients plants need most. Its carbon-to-nitrogen ratio is an astonishingly low 0.8 to 1. That means it is almost pure nitrogen fuel. When you add diluted urine to your sawdust pile, naturally occurring enzymes called urease immediately break down the urea into ammonia and carbon dioxide. The microbes drink this up and use it to tear through the tough wood fibers, generating tremendous heat in the process. A good working ratio is about 1 part urine to 10 parts water, applied thoroughly to soak the entire pile. Now, if that method is not for you, I completely understand. You have another excellent option that works beautifully: fresh poultry manure. Chicken manure has a C/N ratio of roughly 6 to 10 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. It is incredibly nitrogen-rich, which is why gardeners call it hot manure. And here is the beautiful thing about combining it with sawdust. The sawdust acts as a bulking agent. It provides structure and air pockets,
that keep the heavy manure from compacting into a dense, airless, foul-smelling mess. They balance each other perfectly.
The recipe is straightforward. Mix roughly 3 parts sawdust to 1 part fresh chicken manure by volume. You can also use cow manure at a similar ratio. Combine them thoroughly, and you have just created the foundation of something extraordinary. Isn't it something? The very materials the world considers waste, sawdust, manure, even urine, are exactly the ingredients nature designed to create the most fertile soil on Earth. Nothing is wasted in God's design. Section 4. The breath of life. Heat, air, and the sponge test. All right, you have mixed your carbon-rich sawdust with your nitrogen-rich activator. Now comes the part that separates a successful compost pile from a smelly failure. And most people, even experienced gardeners, get this step wrong. Your compost pile is not a dead heap of material. It is a living, breathing system. Billions of microorganisms are in there, working around the clock. And they need 2 things to survive: moisture and oxygen. Get either one wrong, and the whole process stalls or turns rotten. If the pile is too dry, the bacteria go dormant. Nothing decomposes. You are just staring at a pile of dry sawdust and manure for months. If the pile is too wet, the oxygen gets pushed out, and anaerobic bacteria take over. These are the bad bacteria. They produce that terrible, sour, rotting smell that will have your neighbors knocking on your door. So how do you find the sweet spot? Use the wrung-out sponge test. This is free, it takes 5 seconds, and it is more reliable than any moisture meter you can buy. Reach your bare hand into the center of the pile and grab a generous fistful of the mixture. Squeeze it as hard as you can. If water drips and runs down your wrist, it is too wet. Add more dry sawdust. Now open your hand slowly. The material should hold its shape, like a rough little ball. It should not crumble apart into dust. That feeling of a damp kitchen sponge that has been wrung out firmly, that is exactly the moisture level you are aiming for. Now, because sawdust packs down tightly, you need to physically introduce oxygen by turning the pile. Once every 7 days, take a pitchfork or shovel and turn the entire pile. Bring the dark, moist material from the bottom up to the top and move the dry outer material into the center. This rotation ensures every part of the pile gets its turn in the hot zone. And speaking of heat, here is where something truly remarkable happens. When the nitrogen, the moisture, and the oxygen are all dialed in correctly, the pile begins to heat up dramatically from the inside. The metabolic energy of billions of multiplying microbes raises the internal temperature to 135, sometimes 160 degrees Fahrenheit. You can actually feel the heat radiating from the center when you plunge your hand in. At these temperatures, something wonderful takes place. Any dangerous pathogens from the manure are destroyed. Any weed seeds that might have hitchhiked into your pile are killed. The heat is nature's own sterilization system. It purifies the material while the microbes transform it. So remember, sponge test for moisture, turn weakly for oxygen, and let the heat do its purifying work. These 3 steps are the difference between beautiful, dark, sweet-smelling compost and a pile of problems.
Section 5. The 30-Day Miracle. The Invisible Fungal Army. Now, here is something that might discourage you if I do not address it honestly. Traditional composting of woody materials like sawdust can take a very long time. We are talking 90 days on the fast end, sometimes up to 270 days, nearly a year of waiting. At our age, who has that kind of patience for fertilizer? But here is a technique that most home gardeners have never heard of.
It is called two-stage composting, and when you pair it with a specific group of beneficial fungi, you can compress that entire timeline down to roughly 30 days. Stage 1 is the hot phase we just discussed. That intense, high-heat decomposition period lasts about 10 days. The temperature soars, the organic matter breaks down rapidly, and the pile shrinks noticeably. Then, as the temperature begins to drop naturally, you enter Stage 2, the maturation phase. And this is where you invite the real champions into the pile. I want to introduce you to a mighty little warrior called Trichoderma. These are fast-growing, highly competitive beneficial fungi, and they have a voracious appetite for tough wood fibers, specifically the crystalline cellulose that makes sawdust so hard to break down. Trichoderma produces powerful enzymes that shatter the complex cell walls of the wood, accelerating the decomposition process dramatically. But here is what makes Trichoderma truly extraordinary, and this is the part that most people never learn. When you eventually apply this finished fertilizer to your garden, those Trichoderma fungi come along with it. They colonize the root zones of your plants and form a living, defensive shield around them. They actively suppress devastating soil-borne diseases like fusarium wilt and rhizoctonia root rot, diseases that can wipe out an entire bed of tomatoes or peppers overnight. And it gets even better.
Trichoderma have been scientifically proven to stimulate the production of natural plant hormones, like auxins and gibberellins. These hormones signal your plant's roots to grow longer, deeper, and stronger. You are not just feeding your plants. You are arming them with an invisible protective army and a built-in growth engine. You can find Trichoderma powder at most garden supply stores or order it online. A small amount sprinkled into your pile during the cooling phase is all it takes. Think of it as planting a seed of protection that will guard your garden for seasons to come. Section 6. The Pace Secret. The free trick nurseries rarely share. If you have stayed with me this far, you are about to learn the single most important secret in this entire video. This is the detail that separates average compost from truly premium, high-performance bio-fertilizer. And it is something the big commercial nurseries know, but almost never tell home gardeners. Here is the problem. As the cellulose and lignin in your sawdust break down over those 30 days, the microorganisms produce natural organic acids as a byproduct. These acids cause the pH of your compost pile to drop, making it increasingly acidic. And if the pH drops too low, below about 6.0, something devastating happens. Even if your soil is absolutely loaded with nutrients, an overly acidic environment physically locks those nutrients up. Phosphorus forms insoluble compounds. Calcium and magnesium become completely unavailable to your plant roots. Your plants could be sitting in a feast of nutrition and still starve to death because they cannot absorb a single bite. This is one of the most common hidden causes of poor plant growth, and most gardeners never think to check for it. The solution? 2 items you probably already have in your home: wood ash from your fireplace and crushed eggshells from your morning breakfast. Wood ash is an alkaline mineral powerhouse. It contains up to 50% calcium, along with potassium oxide and magnesium. When you sprinkle a thin layer of wood ash into your composting sawdust, it immediately neutralizes those harsh organic acids and brings the pH back up to that sweet spot between 6.2 and 7.0. That is the range where every nutrient in the soil becomes wonderfully available to your plants. The extra potassium from the ash also strengthens your plants' cell walls, helping them survive heat and drought. But wood ash works fast and can dissipate quickly. For long-term stability, you need your crushed eggshells. Wash them, dry them, and grind them into a fine powder. Eggshells are nearly pure calcium carbonate. Unlike ash, they decompose very slowly, providing a steady, months-long drip feed of calcium to your plants. And calcium is the exact mineral that prevents blossom end rot, that heartbreaking black spot that ruins tomatoes and bell peppers every summer. Here is how you apply it. As you build your sawdust compost pile, sprinkle a light dusting of wood ash and crushed eggshell powder every few inches between layers. You are curing the pH problem before it ever starts. It is a simple, free, preventative step that makes an enormous difference in the quality of your final product. Friends, this is the kind of knowledge that used to be passed down from generation to generation. Somehow, along the way, we stopped sharing it. But not here, not on this channel.
Section 7. The Forest Floor Test and the 400% Victory. So how do you know when the transformation is complete? How do you know when your discarded sawdust has officially become premium bio-fertilizer? You do not need a laboratory. You do not need expensive testing equipment. You just need the senses God gave you. Start with the smell test. When raw sawdust is still decomposing, it smells sharp and acidic, sometimes a bit like ammonia. But when it is truly finished and stable, something beautiful happens. Reach in, bring a handful to your nose, and breathe in. It should smell deeply, richly, unmistakably, like the floor of an old-growth forest right after a gentle spring rain. That gorgeous, earthy aroma is actually a chemical called geosmin, and it is produced by beneficial bacteria that only thrive in healthy, living soil. If you smell that, you know you have succeeded. Visually, the bright yellow wood shavings will have transformed into a dark, almost black, crumbly material. It should look and feel like the richest garden soil you have ever held. Now, let me explain exactly why this outperforms regular compost by such a wide margin. Standard green waste compost, the kind made from kitchen scraps and lawn clippings, breaks down and disappears into the soil within a single growing season. It provides a quick burst of nutrients, but it does not last. Sawdust-based biofertilizer is fundamentally different because of lignin. Lignin is the tough structural compound that makes wood hard. It decomposes much more slowly than soft plant matter, which means it creates a highly stable, long-lasting humus that persists in your soil for years, not months. This gives you 3 massive advantages. First, water retention. In sandy soils, this humus acts like a powerful sponge, dramatically increasing water holding capacity. You could cut your summer watering schedule in half. Second, aeration. In heavy, compacted clay soils, the tiny woody structures create macropores,
Little air channels that let oxygen reach deep into the earth so your plant roots can breathe. And third, the one that truly sets it apart, cation exchange capacity, or CEC. The organic acids from the decomposed sawdust act like microscopic magnets. They grab hold of essential nutrients, calcium, potassium, magnesium, and hold them tightly in the soil, preventing them from washing away during heavy rain. Then, they release those nutrients slowly, directly to the plant roots, exactly when the plant needs them. It is a natural, slow-release delivery system built right into the soil. The result? Faster growth, wider, greener leaves, heavier fruits, and soil that is alive with disease-fighting microorganisms. All from a pile of dust that someone else threw away as garbage.
My dear friends, the garden is the most magnificent classroom on earth. It teaches us that nothing is ever truly wasted in the hands of someone who understands the process. A pile of sawdust that the world discards as rubbish becomes, with a little knowledge, patience, and care, the foundation of the most fertile soil you have ever grown in. If there is a woodworking shop in your town, or a pile of untreated sawdust sitting in your shed, I encourage you to try this. Follow the steps, trust the science, and watch the miracle of decomposition unfold in your own backyard. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever accidentally starved your plants by spreading raw sawdust in your garden? What nitrogen source are you planning to use for your first pile? Drop your story in the comments below. We are a community here at Rooted in Grace, and every time you share your experience, you help another gardener avoid the same mistakes and grow stronger. If this video taught you something new, if it gave you something you can take out into the garden tomorrow, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. It costs you nothing, but it helps us keep sharing these simple, powerful, life-giving gardening secrets with people all over the world. Until next time, may your hands stay dirty, may your hearts stay full, and may you always remain rooted in grace. God bless you all, and I will see you in the next one.